I wish to state that I will be opposing this amendment. I think we've come a long way to get to this stage, and honestly, when it started, I wasn't sure that we'd get here. But after 35 years of debate, Citizens' Assembly, Oireachtas Committee, referendum, People's Vote, Health Committee, contributions in this chamber, I think it's fair to say that we're all fairly well informed and the public are as informed as we are. And I have to say, I think that there's quite a sinister motive behind the suggestion that by not funding abortions, we will somehow save lives. That suggests to me that by not funding abortions, we will deprive women of less means, of lower means, from accessing services, thereby forcing them to remain pregnant against their will, regardless of the situation. And that is control of women by financial means, which I think is really the wrong approach to take, regardless of your personal views. Surely the suggestion that you would control a woman's access to these services because she can't afford to pay for them herself, simply to achieve what you believe is the right way to do things, or that you want to achieve a restriction of abortion, so therefore you'll use money to do so. I just think that's so wrong on so many levels. And I think you are exploiting the impoverished, you are exploiting vulnerable women, and not every woman has financial independence. She may not have a medical card, but that doesn't mean that she has access to the funds she needs to pay. For whatever reasons, we don't know her domestic situation, but we know there are people in those circumstances. And to discriminate on the basis of socio-economic background, particularly from a deputy that has advocated that there should not be inequality, that there has been a two-tier access to health services, and that there is inequalities across our society in many areas, to actually advocate that you would discriminate against women on the basis of how much money they have, again, is just so wrong. And I think it's a perverse way of imposing a personal view on other women. And while I respect that the deputy's views are sincerely held and they are personal views, to try and impose those views on other women and use financial means to do so, I really think is the wrong way to go about it. And think about the inequity in that and the impact of such an amendment. What about a young girl that maybe isn't working, doesn't have money? We don't know why she's in those situations. What about a young girl that maybe has been impregnated due to incest? Where is she supposed to go to get the money to pay for the service? Like I said, what about a woman that may be in a very difficult domestic situation where her partner is the problem and she doesn't have financial independence? Maternity service, we don't charge for those maternity services. They are health services. Why would this be different? This is part of maternity services. And if they can't access a termination due to cost, do you think that that woman, having really thought about this and being in a situation where, for whatever reason, she needs to access those services, do you think that because we will put that barrier, erect a financial barrier, that somehow she'll just sit back and get on with it? That that's the reason that she's accessing a service, because it's a little bit easier? I think that does a disservice to women, and I think that it is quite insulting to the process that she has gone through to get to that point of making that decision. And I think, the deputy clearly fundamentally disagrees with abortion in pretty much all circumstances. But the fact remains that the people of this country have voted to provide services. And you say that they didn't vote to pay for abortion services. Well, I would counter that by saying citizens did not vote to discriminate between women that are poor and women that are wealthy. Citizens did not vote for inequality. Citizens did not vote to erect barriers to the most impoverished and vulnerable women in this society. So certainly citizens did not vote for the amendment and the intention of this amendment. And certainly I think that trying to restrict a woman's choice by financial means is imposing your own personal view through the back door, and is trying to undermine the very real and sincere and well-informed vote that took place last May. Citizens knew what they were voting for. They knew that women needed services, and they're very well aware that even as of today, every week women are still travelling and still accessing services in another jurisdiction. So it's about time that I think, whilst I appreciate there are a number of deputies, and I think actually very much in the minority, are very unhappy with the result of the referendum. It took place, it happened, and that vote stands, and it's as valid as any other referendum that has taken place. And simply because you're not happy with it, the idea that you would come into this chamber and seek to materially and substantially amend the legislation, and bearing in mind that unusually the legislation was put before the people, they knew what was intended to go through this House, to try and substantially seek to change that, to try and restrict access. And remark, I mean, this amendment doesn't seek to restrict access for everybody. It seeks to zone in and hone in on women that don't have the financial means to access services. So again, I think that this method of control and trying to use money to restrict services, I think, is just really anti-women. It is anti-choice. It is seeking to exploit the very real inequalities that we have in our society, which we know are there. There are many women that would not be able to afford these services if they were charged for. That is the fact. And it seems to be suggesting that if we can somehow restrict women or force them to remain pregnant, that somehow we'll get what we want. It doesn't matter about the women affected. We will get our way. Doesn't matter about the vote. Doesn't matter about the people's will. Doesn't matter about what's right for the woman. We will get what we want, no matter what it takes. And it doesn't matter if we have to use unequal means to get there. It doesn't matter if we have to use money as a way of restricting women. It doesn't matter if we have to seek to exploit their very difficult circumstances, whether they be very young, unemployed, in a very difficult domestic situation. If we have to exploit that, then that's what we'll do, because that's what this amendment says to me. And I think it's really important that we look to the impact of such an amendment. I appreciate the Deputy's very personal views, but again, to seek to exploit the financial inequalities in this country, to try and force your own views and try and restrict access, I think really goes against the spirit of the people's vote last May.